Let's maul in the Central Committee. Let's cringe in the Central Committee. Let's bog in the Central Committee right now.
What happened yesterday? You all know what happened yesterday. Democrats came out and they voted against the $15 minimum wage. Bernie Sanders put forward an amendment that would have asked for the Budget Act to ignore the $15 minimum wage. And 8 Democrats voted basically to uphold the parliamentarians' advisory opinion that the $15 minimum wage could not be advanced during the reconciliation bill. And then there was this. This is Kyrsten Sinema. Kyrsten Sinema is the Arizona senior senator from Arizona. Now, Kyrsten Sinema is a very interesting person because if you look at Kyrsten Sinema, she'll show you everything wrong with the left. Wait, what? This is a twist? This is a twisty twist. Mike, what do you mean? Kyrsten Sinema grew up in politics as a Green Party radlib. Someone totally disconnected from the labor movement, from organized working class power. Rather, kind of a white, yuppie, green progressive type. You know what I'm talking about. Talking about chakras and crystals and the Green Party. That's Kyrsten Sinema's background. And as she got closer and closer to power, she moved further and further right. And because she didn't come from a labor movement and an organized left that could hold her accountable, she just, every step of the way was another justifiable decision. It was tactical. You could say it was almost a tactical end step, you know? Tactical end step. Not tactical N word. Tactical end step, okay? And you'll see why people who say things like tactical N words and tactical end steps, they end up in the right. And that's because you can't come from Beverly Hills, not be connected to anything organized on the left, and then end up a socialist when the chips hit the ground. Because you're not going to want to fight. If you are pampered in Beverly Hills, you're not going to want to fight because you think your ass is too valuable. All right? And politics is not just getting Democrats elected. Politics is not just making the lesser of two evil choices all the time. And if you think it is, you become a Democrat blue MAGA partisan at the end of the day. And you have no values, and you have no positions, and you end up with this. Kyrsten Sinema voting down a $15 minimum wage. Now, we can get into the arguments, and I will happily get into the arguments. But when Joe Biden, I want to bring you back to the summer. Do you guys remember the debates that we were having when Bernie Sanders dropped out of the primary? Do you guys remember those debates? And when I said, hey, the progressive left should not throw their support behind Biden unless they have real material promises and concessions in personnel, Meaning Joe Biden is saying, I'm going to bring in a bunch of Bernie people into my administration to hold me accountable. Remember when I said we shouldn't support Joe Biden unless he does that? I didn't say let Trump win. I said Biden wants our support. He's got to earn our support. You remember that? Vaush is against the $50 minimum wage. You know you're a lib as fuck when FDR would have argued against you. Yeah, I know. He attacked people for being in favor of a $25 minimum wage, which while it would be one of the highest minimum wages we've ever had, by productivity, that's not that crazy of a thought. In fact, the fact that someone who thinks they're on the left thinks something like a $25 minimum wage is ridiculous shows you just how far right our conversation is. So when you have so if Vaush ever went to the Senate, this is what Vaush would look like. Kyrsten Sinema. And he would make every single step to the right away. He would justify it as tactically necessary. Because he has no principles. Okay? He would go, well, you know, it's harder for me to raise money, which means it's less likely that I win the election if I... So, you know, harm reduction tells me that I need to accept money from the corporations in order to beat the Republican. QED, I win. Utilitarianism. We got it. Kyrsten Sinema walked into the Senate carrying a large chocolate cake, tapped Mitch McConnell on the shoulder, and said, hey, watch this. Went up in front of the entire Senate with her Lululemon bag and voted down like this. Voted down a $15 minimum wage. And back over the summer, chat. Here's the full clip if you want to show it. Thank you.
I still have never watched a Vaush stream, and I don't plan to.
I would highly recommend you don't watch a Vaush stream. You're never going to learn anything that you can't see from MSNBC. Or a Twitter thread. So here it is, chat. You'll see it. Let's watch this together. Here's the Sinema walks in. This is Mitch McConnell, Republican minority leader, but you can never tell these days. Taps him on the back. Signals to him. Votes.
Miss Sinema. No.
Walks off with her chocolate cake. Are we supposed to build a coalition with Kyrsten Sinema type politicians? Yeah. Do you think that leftists obsessed with harm minimization before all else will never be able to win power? It's a lie. They don't believe in harm minimization, chat. If they believed in harm minimization, they'd be voting for a $15 minimum wage. So, what? The centrists don't believe in minimizing harm. So you can't minimize harm through them. Because they will do whatever they fucking want to do. And they're unpredictable because minimizing harm isn't what operates their politics. So you cannot effectively predict what they're going to do because they are not making decisions based on harm minimization. So if you go, I'll vote for Kyrsten Sinema, it's harm minimization. At least you'll vote for a $15 minimum wage. You're wrong. Because she's not operating to minimize harm. You can't make calculations that are correct because you don't know what is her operative organizing principle. I did a statistical investigation on Senate versus Congress representation for my Bathaside, and how much the Senate doesn't represent changes and what people vote for is fucking crazy. That's been proven many times. What pisses me off is the amendment was going to fail because it needs 60, but holy shit, these Democrat demons couldn't even be unified just this fucking once. I hope these fuckers get primaried. Let's get back to Kyrsten Sinema because this is the important shit.
All right, so we got the Senate doing their Senate thing today, right? The vote-a-rama. There's all these amendments, and there's this sort of standoff happening. And something that happened there today 7 Democrats and 1 independent who caucuses with Democrats joined with Republicans to shoot down raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour as part of the Biden COVID relief package. Among those Democratic no votes, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Chris Coons of Delaware. The moment that really stood out was when Arizona Democrat Kyrsten Sinema walked up to cast her vote.
Ms. Sinema, no.
Now, she represents Arizona. Maybe that was a homage to the late John McCain, who famously did that to that ACA repeal vote. But that full thumbs down from Arizona helped end hopes for a really big wage hike that the Congressional Budget Office says would directly affect 17 million American workers. I want to bring in Maria Teresa Kumar, founding president and CEO of Voto Latino, Faz Shakir, former senior advisor, Senate Democratic leader Harry Reid, and current advisor to Bernie Sanders. Faz, let me start with you. I want people to understand this vote before we analyze this. This was a vote that was going to fail either way. It was essentially a symbolic message vote because it needed 60 votes. It was a filibusterable vote. So going into this, everyone knows it's not going to pass. No Republicans are going to vote for it. So it's a free ride. It's a layup. You get to get up there and say, yes, we want a $15 minimum wage. So it was very, very surprising to me and a lot of people to see Democrats, 8 of them in the caucus, vote no. What is your explanation?
Well, I mean, Chris, you got to go back in history a little bit. Remember, President Obama suggested raising the minimum wage to $10.10. It was Hillary Clinton during the 2016 campaign who suggested raising it to $12. It was Bernie Sanders who's been pushing along with SEIU to raise the wage to $15 an hour. And as a result of that, we have gotten a lot of progress in the Democratic caucus, but not all the way, clearly. And, you know, what's painful, Chris, is you take Senator Sinema, Arizona's got a $12 minimum wage. And in fact, if you look at Raise the Wage, which gradually raises the minimum wage to $15.
That's just something I've been saying for days, chat. So I'm glad to see that some of the messaging that we've been putting out in the channel, I'm not saying that he got it from me, but this is something that I've been saying for literal days. I've been saying this for, we'll do everything in our power to end your political career. In fact, this is a disgusting charade because Arizona's minimum wage is already $12 an hour and thus wouldn't be affected by the federal minimum wage until 2024. Also, Arizona's other Democratic senator voted for it.
Over 5 years, it would be at $12.50, which is where Arizona is now. So in many ways, it doesn't really impact Arizona. And yet you have Senator Sinema denying many people, millions of people around the country, a raise of their wages.
Maria, what did you make of it?
The Hill staff for a long time ago on appropriations. And this was fairly unusual because what those 8 did was say that they were not going to deliver the Biden agenda. And the Biden administration right now is to channel a little LBJ and demonstrate that there are consequences when there are not voting down for the president's agenda. As you mentioned, Chris, this was a layup. But I have to say, when
not only this, chat, this was part of Joe Biden's platform. This was part of Joe Biden's promises. This was part of the Democratic Party platform, the $15 minimum wage. It's official. The Democratic Party has adopted a raise to minimum wage $50 per hour as part of the party platform heading into the 2016 election season. Do you support raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour nationwide? Yes. Mike Bloomberg, Joe Biden. I guess not. But here's the thing, Chad. If you weren't a fucking doofus, if you hadn't been following politics for 4 years maximum, you would have known that Joe Biden wasn't serious. It's not just the positions a politician says that matter. It's what they're willing to fight for. If a politician is not willing to fight for something, just because they mouth platitudes about it, doesn't mean it's going to happen. And I'm sorry that a generation of people has to learn this every fucking election. But how about you listen to those of us who've been there before when we say, we don't support Joe Biden because he's bad and his entire history is capitulating to the right. And if he gets in the office, we have no reason to believe he's not going to do it again. And that's what he's doing again.
when we witnessed this thumbs down by Sinema, I think for a lot of folks, people felt at odds, because when John McCain did it, it was to save healthcare for millions of Americans. What she did today was turn down this idea that there was going to be some sort of closer to economic equity for millions of Americans. And $15 does not keep pace with the inflation rate of the 1970s, when the minimum wage was really first established. So it was
the minimum wage was the minimum wage was established in 1935 under who? FDR. The highest the minimum wage ever was in American history was 1969 or 1968 under LBJ, as far as inflation adjusted dollars. So not only did the minimum wage not start in the 70s, MSNBC, if you're going to talk about the minimum wage, at least understand basic facts. It was actually higher in the 60s than it is now. Do you think this debacle is going to help progressives or help Republicans? Help Republicans. Should the squad vote down the bill? I would vote no. If I were in the House, I would vote no. I would vote this COVID relief bill down. And I would say that without a pledge to end the filibuster, there is no reasonable path for Joe Biden's platform or agenda to be passed. And in the light of Democratic senators' reticence to include a $15 minimum wage, and likely the only bill that passes this year, I will not support the bill in its current form. It cuts eligibility for direct payments. It cuts unemployment insurance. I am not going to support that bill. And unless the stock market starts going down, it seems that the centrists don't feel any heat. So I do not support the bill because it is unacceptable that this be the only thing passed while Joe Biden's first 2 years. Now, remember, chat, they could pass 3 reconciliation bills a year. Those are the bills that require 50 votes. So when they don't pass these bills, they need 60 votes if they don't use a reconciliation bill. So by balancing the $15 minimum wage out of this reconciliation bill, they cannot pass it. When Joe Biden and Kamala Harris refused to rule that the $15 minimum wage was in order, that ended the $15 minimum wage from being passed ever, while the filibuster exists. I need you to understand that no bill will pass and be signed into law if they maintain the filibuster. That means no H.R. 1 Voting Rights Act. That means no Equality Act. That means no infrastructure spending. That means no climate change bill. That means nothing. Every single one of Joe Biden's promises that is not connected to an executive order will not pass. So if I were in the House, I would vote no. Because this is the only leverage we have. Am I mad? Do I want to help people? Absolutely. But I'm not giving up my leverage without concessions. And they ain't making shit for concessions. To not even pass a $15 minimum wage, which was in the platform in 2016, is unconscionable. And if you want to understand what Joe Biden thinks, you look at the senators from Delaware. I want you to explain this. If this Delaware, how did Joe Biden and the Democrats do in Delaware in 2020, chat? How did they do? Joe Biden got 58% of the vote. He nearly won by 20 points. So what's the excuse for those senators? In a D plus 20 seat, why are they voting against the $15 minimum wage? Why did they vote against a $15 minimum wage in a state they won by 20 points? You want to argue with me about some other moderate? First of all, you're wrong. Moderates love the $15 minimum wage. The type of people who would swing from Republican to Democrat are the type of people who love the $15 minimum wage. So purely electorally, there is no argument. The economic argument? There is no economic argument. Economists agree that a $15 minimum wage would not hurt the economy. And you know what? We have real empirical tests. There are states with $15 cities with $15 minimum wage right now. So there's no economic argument. There's no political argument. Why? These are Joe Biden's home state senators. They voted against it. Their lack of support for the measure on its face was surprising. The two Delaware Democrats hail from the Biden's home state where local Democrats are pushing to gradually raise the wage to $15 an hour at the state level. Biden also supports it. But on the other hand, both senators represent a business-friendly state. In a statement explaining his vote, Carper cited a need to protect businesses from an added expense as they struggle through the pandemic. I've backed a $15 minimum wage on the federal level for years, Carper said in a statement. At a time when our economy is slowly recovering, though policymakers are responsible to be especially mindful of the fragile state of small businesses all over the country, many of which are just fighting just to stay open during this unprecedented crisis. So this chat is what's known as an outright, bold-faced lie. They think you're stupid. The $15 minimum wage does not apply until 2025. It gradually raises it over years. They think you're stupid. Every Democrat and many Republicans agree that the federal minimum wage of $7.25 is too low. It has been for too long, Kuhn said. It has to be raised. President Biden has called us for us to raise to $50 an hour. I'll work with my colleagues on legislation to raise the minimum wage and index it annually. But I'm going to vote against it when it could actually pass.
But this is an opportunity really for Joe Biden to say, you guys you're going to have to come down to the White House because we're going to have a talking to.
Yeah, we should say that the Senator Sinema put out a statement today, a long statement about basically saying she supports it, essentially saying she supports minimum wage. But senators of both parties have shown support for raising the federal minimum wage. We should keep open debate and amendment process separate from COVID-focused reconciliation bill. I will keep working with colleagues in both parties to ensure Americans can access good-paying jobs, quality education, skills training, to build economically secure lives for themselves and their families. I mean, Faz, this is one of those places I think where, like, I hate talking about Senate procedure. It sucks that this is what we have to talk about, but it's a place that cuts off the feedback of democratic accountability. So no one ever knows what anyone is voting for or against, because it's like, well, we weren't really voting for it and it was going to fail in the filibuster. And actually, our no vote was because we don't want it included with this bill. And it's like, people want to know, what do you stand for and what do you deliver? Yeah. And the that gets, the worst democracy functions, in my humble opinion.
And the irony, Chris, is that had the parliamentarian ruled our way, right, and you would have had a 50-vote threshold for the minimum wage, I actually think the politics would have moved so dramatically that you would have had basically the caucus supporting a $15 minimum wage, which is kind of, ludicrous. But because, as you mentioned, we have a filibuster, we have the parliamentarian ruling, now we've got weird politics and people take a rider to show their moderateness. And so, yeah, I think, they're suggesting, we want a deal on the minimum wage. We want to find a different number than 15. Yeah. But it is ludicrous that we have procedural rules that are stopping us from delivering justice in America.
The other thing that's frustrating about this, Maria, is that, there are lots of things where people will say, well, that's not popular, or, you have this idea, banning fracking, or, which is popular actually in a lot of places. But there's lots of things that Joe Manchin, it's a Trump plus 25 state. There's lots of things Joe Manchin can't vote for and hope to get reelected in the state. It's just a conservative state. The minimum wage is not one of those things. The minimum wage is popular basically everywhere.
Right. Well, and what you're saying is absolutely right. It's popular across party lines, regardless of how you vote. Most Republicans, independents, Democrats, they all believe that the $7 minimum wage is just not sustainable. But this is the thing, Chris, what I found really curious. every single senator that voted on from the Democratic side, they're not up for reelection. So they're basically betting that the voters will not remember them when they are up for reelection in 2024. That's one thing. But the other thing that I really find curious is that when Sinema says that she wants to have a standalone bill, because this is tied to appropriations, it's tied to financing, so to speak, it has to go and be the filibuster.
Right.
The filibuster, which she supports. So it's kind of wanting to have it both ways, but
Right.
not speaking straight to the American people where she stands.
Yeah, and I think to Maria Teresa, you make a great point about the politics of this. You know, I said this earlier today, Faz, on Twitter, which is that I do think we have a tendency to interpret all political actions through a lens of political calculation. And I think something that you will agree with, and you, Maria Teresa, as well, having worked in Congress, is senators have belief systems and ideologies. They, like, some of them really believe or they really believe that the minimum wage shouldn't go through reconciliation. I think that's a weird belief. I think it's a wrong belief. But they, like, these people have beliefs. Some of them are bad beliefs. But they actually do have them, and they act on them. And that was kind of what we saw today.
Through that, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll make a controversial statement about Senator Manchin for a moment. Yeah. I think there's a lot of huffing and puffing, a lot of theater. To my progressive friends out there, for all of that, he hasn't gotten a lot. I mean, you know, he wanted to cut a little bit of the direct payments. Well, guess what? 158.5 million people are getting checks this time. 162 got it last time. Guess what? For the 158 million people, it's going to be $1,400 rather than $600. So all he did was tweak a little bit. Again, today we saw in this deal, Chris, cut it for $100 on UI for like 3 weeks. But, you know, what's he getting? This is a progressive bill, and I think there's a lot of theater, and he's quite frankly not getting much.
I agree with you, Faz. I also think, like, Joe Manchin is in a different category than almost all these people. You get yourself elected to Senate in a midterm election in West Virginia, man. You've got something figured out that I sure
politics. He's playing his
It's just because he's well known in West Virginia for a long time. But the numbers are moving against him as West Virginians become more and more Republican because the Democratic Party has dissolved. Joe Manchin will be swept out in the next election. He's toast. Okay, he's a Doug Jones. He's an expiring commodity. Okay, his personal brand that got him where he is, that's over. It's over. He'll be gone the next election in West Virginia. Just so you know. And you know how we can tell? You can just look at Joe Manchin elections. You could just go to his elections. And you'll see it's going against him every single time. It's getting worse. 2004 gubernatorial, 63%. 2008, 69. 2010 Senate, 53. 2018, 49.5. Down 11. The guy's fucking toast. Next election, in 2024, he's done. He's done. I know he was also Secretary of State of West Virginia as well. He's toast. He's done. Okay? 2018 was a super Democratic wave year. So he's done in 2024. He's out. He's gone. He's kaput. He's expiring. He's a commodity that's going bad. Ted Cruz said that the COVID bill only applies to 9% of the bill towards COVID relief. It's cynical, he said. Comment, I don't care. And that's not at all true. He's a lying piece of shit. I don't need to nitpick Ted Cruz's lies. Holy fucking shit, dude. All right, let's keep talking about Kyrsten Sinema. Senator Sinema's spokesperson said it's sexist to comment on a female politician's body language or physical demeanor when HuffPost inquired about her thumbs down vote on the minimum wage. Now, if you go over to my Twitter account, twitch.tv or twitter.com/MikeFromPA, I had a reply to this. Sinema's media flack having a profile picture of her cruising around on her yacht is actually too perfect. I stand by what I said. Commentary about a female senator's body language, clothing, or physical demeanor does not belong in a serious media outlet. Now, Chad, I want to draw your attention to something. I posted Cinema's Media Flack having a profile picture of her cruising around on her yacht is actually too perfect. Now, I want you to know that Hutch corrected me and said this would be the smallest yacht in the history of yachts. Not a big cinema guy, but that's just a boat. So, thankfully, we have the boat understander logging on. A boat understander has logged on. Thank you, Hutch, for correcting us. We use the term yacht. Now I don't have a profile picture of it. I don't know. I just Googled it. What's the difference between a yacht and a boat? A yacht is a larger recreational boat or ship. The word yacht comes from Dutch origin. A boat, on the other hand, is smaller in size. It can be anything from a fisherman's boat to a sailboat. As previously mentioned, size matters when it comes between differentiating between a boat and yacht. Yachts can range from 35 feet all the way up to 160 feet in length. Now, I don't have a yacht. I don't have a side shot, so I don't know if it's greater than 35 feet, you know? So, looking up the difference between boat and yacht, a yacht is able to sail in deeper ocean waters. So, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, like, I think it might be on the side of a boat. I can't tell. I guess I should have said having a profile picture of her cruising around on her pleasure craft is actually too perfect. It's a pleasure craft of someone who makes way more than minimum wage. Yacht implies rich. She's fucking rich. She's fucking rich. I mean, you want what? You want to find out? Let's find out more. I mean, Hannah L. Hurley, the press secretary of Kirsten Cinema. Let's take a look. I don't want to click on some randoms. I'll have to check this out later. Point is, she's doing quite well as the press secretary of Kirsten Cinema, okay? I wouldn't call it a yacht. I thought most people's idea of a yacht is like 2 stories with a bridge. I think the point that I'm making here, in case you're not clear, I'm not doing actual yacht debate discourse right now. I'm not doing yacht debate discourse. I'm showing you that these people are so completely out of touch, they can afford to buy pleasure craft. Now, if you don't know anything about boating, it's very expensive. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, in fact. And if you are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in your pleasure craft, you're probably not affected by a $15 minimum wage. And so when you go around trying to call someone sexist for commenting on how gleefully Kirsten Cinema voted against a $15 minimum wage, you might be what's known as out of touch. You might be out of touch. Comments about a women's boat are really out of line for a political stream. Good point. Good point. You're right, we have a sailboat and it's very expensive to have any kind of boat. Hutch thinks that it's not the size of the pleasure craft that matters. What matters is the motion of the ocean. No. Hutch is the opposite. Hutch thinks that it's not a problem for our senator spokespeople to be boaters. And it's an important distinction between boating and yachting, okay? And when you defend crushing a $15 minimum wage that hasn't been raised since 2007, it would increase the wages of 40% of African American workers. Excuse me, 40% of women. Then you're actually sexist, okay? A $15 does affect the rich, just not positively. Yeah, I mean, they have to pay it, so the money goes from the rich to the poor. A full-time minimum wage earner makes less than $60,000 a year. This is a no-brainer. Tell Congress to raise the wage. What did I tell you, chat? What did I tell you about these Vaush-style politicians, right? A Vaush-style politician is one that makes signals. They virtue signal And then when it comes to power, because they don't come from a working class, they don't come from a union background, they're not pro-labor, right? They have no idea about any of that. They make tactical N-words and then they end up voting against $15 minimum wage on the floor. Because, hey, they don't want to lose power. The Democrats who voted against it have to be afraid of being called radical liberals or socialists and not getting reelected. This has to be a reason, right? Absolutely not. $15 minimum wage is extremely popular. 2/3 of Americans favor raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. If you vote against the $15 minimum wage, you actually hurt your electoral chances. You become less likely to win. And that's why that woman from the Chris Hayes show mentioned that none of the people who voted against it are up for elections next year. None of the people, everybody who voted for it was up for election next year because the $15 minimum wage is very popular. Now, here's the problem. How are we going to pass it? How are we going to pass it?
The Senate began a process known as Vote-A-Rama, which allows any member to propose an amendment with a full roll call vote. But that process was stalled for...
Speaking of someone who's up for election next year, Raphael Warnock. How did he vote?
8 hours, as both parties tried to win West Virginia Democrat Joe Manchin's support for their competing changes to unemployment benefits. Now, we can report at this hour Manchin has agreed to a Democratic proposal that will decrease the unemployment bonus. That's over the normal amount you get, right? From $400 a week to $300 a week, but it extends it from August to September. It also keeps the first $10,000 of unemployment insurance benefits as non-taxable, which is pretty crucial because there's a lot of folks who are getting a big surprise tax bill. But that now only applies to households with incomes under $150,000. If none of that math scanned you, that's okay. Democratic Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock pushed for a comprehensive COVID rescue bill during his upset bid for a Georgia Senate seat, and he joins me now. Reverend Senator, I want to ask about the sort of details here, but the first thing I want to ask is, you know, every time I talk to people in the U.S. Senate, I say I feel like I'm talking to a culture from another planet, right? Like it's a very strange institution, all sorts of weird traditions that are hard to explain. You're new there. What is it like to go through this? How strange does the institution seem to you, or does it not?
Well, it's great to be here with you tonight, Chris. We're going, through the sausage making of legislation. But the good news is that after months of waiting, and when you think about the long period where nothing happened under the previous administration, relief is right around the corner. Help is on the way. And we'll be here for a little while, but we are there. And I'm confident that we're going to pass the relief that Americans need and deserve in this moment. We're about to pass, I think, a historic piece of legislation that, for one thing, will cut child poverty in half. Think about that. We will cut...
For 1 year. The child tax benefit, the Democrat plan is for 1 year. It's not a permanent child tax credit or child allowance, as it's usually called. What the fuck is he talking about? It's for 1 year. That doesn't cut poverty in half. It's temporary.
Child poverty in half. $1,400 relief payments to people that will go directly in their pockets. And we know that when poor people, when working class people receive relief, they buy food, they buy medicine that's needed, they buy baby diapers, a coat for their kid. It helps them and it stimulates the economy. We're going to get this virus under control and get the American economy roaring again. And I'm proud to be a part of that process.
You were just elected in that special election in January, obviously. It's a closely divided swing state, the state of Georgia now. Will be up again in 2 years because it was a special election. So I think you could say that you have the most frontline position of any senator in that caucus. So from the position of your political life, what do you want to tell your fellow Democrats about what you need to deliver back to your constituents in Georgia?
Well, we've been fighting that good fight from day one, not for me, but for the people I was sent here to represent. You know that I come into this job as a pastor, someone who is used to walking with people through their pain. I've seen firsthand the ways in which people are suffering through this pandemic that has literally taken their loved ones, 500,000 Americans. It's devastated our economy. And the good news, again, is relief is right around the corner. Help is on the way. We're about to pass a historic piece of legislation that will cut child poverty in half, will give workers the relief and the support that they need. In this bill, we have $5 billion of debt relief that will go to farmers of color. And we're going to get this virus under control so that we can safely reopen our schools and our economy. That's the good news, and I couldn't think of a better sermon for a preacher to be preaching on this weekend.
Do you think, in terms of the future, do you think about, do you have hope for the second half of this year, even as someone who, there's a lot of clergy around the country who have not been preaching in person and who desperately want to commune with their flocks again? And do you think that kind of thing is a possibility in the second half of this year if things go right?
What I can tell you is that we're making progress. And what I've insisted on from day one is that we have to follow the science. My faith has no quarrel with science. It's been tough on those of us who worship, whether we worship in a synagogue or in a church on a weekend. But we have stayed apart from one another, not out of a sense of fear as much as out of a fear of love, a sense of love. But the vaccine is being distributed. The president has said that we'll have enough vaccines for every adult by May. And in this package is $20 billion of aid so that we can get the vaccine distributed. I know it's been a long, dark night, but I can see the glimmer of light just on the other end of that tunnel. And I just want folks to hold on, hang in there, continue to socially distance. Help is on the way.
One of the votes today in that vote-a-rama was a vote on the $15 minimum wage. It was, of course, removed by the Senate parliamentarian as not being germane to the specific budget process called reconciliation. The Democrats had 8 no votes along with every Republican. You were a yes vote. Why'd you vote for it?
Oh, I think it's a contradiction to say that people ought to work and not make work pay. I have long been an activist in the fight for 15. And I will not shrink back from that, not one moment in any way. Workers deserve to be paid for their work. America deserves a wage. In a state like mine, in a city like Atlanta, there's a real problem around affordable housing, for example. And what happens is that working class people work all day, every day, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs, and they still can't afford to rent in any city in America. That's not right. And as often is the case, what the morally right thing to do is also the smart thing to do. It's right to pay workers for the work that they do. And when we do, I think we actually spur the economy, and it helps all of us.
You have somebody who just won a swing seat to give the Democrats power. And instead of the caucus of Democrats going to Raphael Warnock and saying, hey, Raphael, you just won a special election. You're up for election in 2 years. What do we need to do to get you reelected? They're talking about the Senate parliamentarian. His voice is nowhere in this discussion. How bad do I think 2022 is going to be? Pretty bad because of a couple things. Number one, no permanent positive change for the American people. Right now, we'll get out of COVID. And I think we're going to get out of COVID by the end of this year. All right? And then you'll have a full year out of COVID. And then the fact that we got out of COVID, it'll be ancient history by the time the election rolls around. And what will the Dems have? They're not, by the way, they're not going to be pushing for major legislation in the election year. In case you're wondering, they're not going to. This is the year of legislative action, and they're all going to be campaigning in 2020 too. Like, they're not going to do a whole bunch of legislation. That's why people talk about the first 100 days, because everybody is in DC and working. Neoliberals will blame it on Bernie Bros, and we will lose seats. What will happen is they'll say it was the defund the police message. Also, hey, you remember all those centrists when they argued with us about the public option? Do you remember that? How many of you remember that? Remember the public option? LMAO, it ain't happening. Biden lied about this too. I see that the New York Times has now belatedly decided to catch up with the reporting of Andrew Perez, DC, and Julia Rock, who have been sounding the alarm about this for nearly 2 months. Biden lifts healthcare plan from insurance lobbyists. The incoming president's plan mimics an insurance industry letter instead of pushing for a promised public option or Democratic legislation to expand Medicare. Dems gift to health insurance predators. Democrats want to pay billions to put Americans on expensive corporate health insurance plans rather than expand Medicare or create a public option. Private insurance wins, and Democrats' first try at expanding health coverage. I can see it now. Well, Joe Biden cured COVID. The Dems tried to pass $15 minimum wage, but they simply couldn't. Come on, guys. Girl power and black people and Latinx people, and X's in every word, is street signs named after black celebrities and trans flags on homeless shelters.
This doesn't have to be over in this way. And nobody wants to hear this. Nobody wants to say this out loud. I worked in the House for 5 years. If you have 10 House Democrats who say right now, we cannot vote for this COVID relief bill unless there is some form of minimum wage increase in this bill, the entire dynamic changes. If you had 10 House Democrats who said, I can't vote for a bill, I promised a minimum wage to my constituents, a minimum wage increase, I cannot vote for a final bill that does not have this in here. All of a sudden, now Joe Manchin's threat to take down the bill, if it includes $15, his sort of implicit threat, he hasn't actually said that, but the sort of implicit threat. Right now, he's the center of a solar system. Everyone revolves around him. But if you create another sun over here, to use the metaphor, and say, listen, we 10 of us in a narrowly divided house can't vote for this, then all of a sudden there's two poles. Then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute. If you're the White House with the entire executive branch behind you, all the, the president of the United States, most powerful office in the world, all of a sudden, right now, you're like, I just got to deal with Joe Manchin. This is a must-pass bill. I've staked my presidency on it. I got to pass this bill. Whatever Joe Manchin wants, he gets because I got to pass this bill. Wait a minute. I got to deal with this other crew over here. Now you've created the situation in which the progressives are actually at the table. And so I would still complain about this because I believe in a $15 minimum wage. But hear me out here. Manchin, I can't support a bill. In the implicit threat, I may not be able to support a bill with a final bill with $15. Progressives over here, we're going to take down the bill unless it includes some sort of minimum wage hike. Well, $7, $15. There's something in the middle here. Yeah. Like maybe it's not 15, maybe then Joe Biden gets it. What you've now done, if the House Democrats actually did that, Joe Biden would have to get off his ass and actually start calling senators like, for instance, let's start with senators in his own damn state, right? He'd actually have to use the power of the presidency to try to forge a compromise. And the thing is that I would still be like, hey, if you only get 13, 12, people like me would still complain. But like for Joe Biden, it's like a win-win situation, right? It's a total win-win. Like
but David, 15 was already a compromise position.
Let me be clear. I just said I would complain about it. It's not acceptable. But like, it is ridiculous that there's nothing in there.
Right now, yes. Right now, we're on track to get nothing. The minimum wage will in 2021. I'm not saying
I would be being like $12 is unacceptable, whatever. But the point is, nothing is beyond an insult. Nothing is like dystopian. It's like it's surfing.
Isn't there an argument if we're talking about negotiation strategy? And I'm interested to know what Shama thinks about this.
By the way, chat, I just want to take a moment while we're watching Bad Faith. They forced the vote. Now what? They wanted us to force the vote on Medicare for all. Well, we forced the vote on the minimum wage. Now what? Forced the vote geniuses. They failed. Now what? Oh, we just go on our podcast and complain about how it's not acceptable. And it absolutely isn't acceptable. And I'm not doing anything better than that. I'm just pointing out that you called AOC a sellout because she didn't want to force the vote on some other bill. They forced the vote on this one. Now what? Lead us. What's the plan? Now we know to primary cinema. Great. I'll be with you in 2024 for the cinema primary. Meanwhile, Sinema will be running against Adolf Rudolph Hess the Jr. the Second from Württemberg. Okay? Congratulations. This is Germanophobia. MR said Bernie forcing the vote was a bad idea. Honestly, I don't think it's a bad idea, but I also realize that forcing the vote doesn't do anything on its own. If you don't have a president, if you don't have a caucus willing to do something, the vote does nothing. And quite frankly, I include the Progressive Caucus in this. The Progressive Caucus should shoot the COVID relief bill down.
Well, given her, role in the whole Fight for 15 movement, isn't there an argument that the part of the problem is that we started with 15? And those same 10 Congress people could say, screw it. I'm not voting for this thing now unless it's 24 where it should be. For sure. Hold the line and say, no, we're going to hold the line until it's 15. We're not budging all this. It's going to be 15. Because at the same time, isn't it true that, and I wanted to ask you about this, there's the 2,000 to 1,400. There's the 400. Oh
my God! Fix your audio. Holy shit!
Unemployment benefit down to 300. There's been all of this. There's the new cutoffs for how much salary you can make in order to get the benefit. There's been all of this negotiating that seems to be Democrats negotiating against themselves for what upside. So when a world where all of that is happening, it does feel really frustrating to think that we have to cut ourselves off at the knees again instead of just holding the line because 15 is popular.
This is actually a point that, okay, so this is a point that I'm going to make that no one else is making. Have you guys noticed that there is no expectation on the behalf of Democratic senators that they do even an ounce of persuasion? And when it's popular to block a progressive politics, for example, defund the police, right? They got some polls that said defund the police only has 42% support. So it's super unpopular to talk about defund. We can't do defund the police. But now that we have poll after poll after poll showing child allowance popular, showing $15 minimum wage, showing COVID relief bill, unemployment checks are popular, the direct payment is popular, now suddenly no one cares about polling. So which is it? Does polling really matter, or does polling not matter at all? Which is it? Oh, I think I figured it out. Flash of brilliance. It's only what is useful to block progressives. It's progressives. If using polling is an argument against progressives, polling matters. If polling hurts progressives, polling doesn't matter. I think there's one controlling thing here. Hurting progressive policy. Don't trust the liberals. They'll betray you.
I completely agree that anything less than 15 is outrageous. But it sort of separating out my own personal opinion on this. My point is nothing, literally not anything in this bill is both completely outrageous, but also a reflection, and this is the key point, a reflection on the fact that Joe Manchin is willing to wield power and the progressives in Congress who have power are not willing to wield power. In other words, Biden sitting on the sidelines, nothing in no minimum wage, nothing. He doesn't even feel like he has to give them anything, nothing, they don't have to give him anything. And the point is they have power to demand something. Like they literally do. The smaller the margin in the House, the more power
That was a 7
just a
vote
handful of
margin.
them have. Like
It was a
they're
7
not
vote
willing to use that power when and the larger 50,000 foot viewpoint here is if they're never willing to use that power ever.
It's like they don't have it at all.
This is a presidency of Joe Manchin. And I want to underscore this point because it's really important. The power must be wielded on bills in which there are no Republican votes. Must pass bill and no Republican votes to get. Because you've heard this before. Oh, Biden's going to add, go through this scenario. Biden's going to add the minimum wage to the National Defense Authorization. Oh, what's wrong with that? That's a good idea. I'm not opposed to that idea. Add a $15 minimum wage to the National Defense Authorization Act. Here's what likely happens. Republicans move to strike it from the National Defense Authorization Act. They probably, maybe they can get Hickenlooper, maybe they can get Manchin, maybe they can get, one of those, Hickenlooper actually voted the right way, but maybe they can get one of those 8 Democrats to vote to strip it. Then once they strip it, they have all 50 Republican votes for it, right? And it's a 90-0 vote, right? You have to be willing to withhold votes on bills in which Biden cannot make the bill worse in order to attract some Republicans. It has to be, you have to take a stand specifically on must-pass legislation where there are no Republican votes available if you water down the bill. That is the way to leverage power. That's not even rocket science, it's game theory. It's just like 101, like negotiation. Like here's the thing. He doesn't need, the Progressive Caucus's votes on the NDAA that doesn't have a minimum wage. He needs their votes now on this. He needs their vote.
So how do we make that happen, David? Because you were with us on this force the vote train. And at that moment, the $15 minimum wage was raised as an issue that it would be better to fight for, to withhold one's vote over.
That's true.
There has been some inclination in the form of some tweets that certain members of the House may be open to such a thing. But of course, we saw that around Force the Vote as well. And Ilhan Omar did some tweets that made us hopeful for a second. I think Cori Bush had some tweets that made us hopeful for a second. But obviously nothing materialized. And from the vantage point of 2 months, it's very difficult to perceive what was gained by voting for Pelosi without seemingly any condition. And so, we were talking before you came on with Shama about what pressures are available to us to encourage these House members to withhold their vote.
Well, look, the problem is it's really a deep sort of psychological issue. And we wrote about this at the Daily Poster, which is basically that, look, Joe Manchin is willing to take down an otherwise good, decent bill. And he's willing to hack away at it for weeks, to try to use his power to make the good parts worse, because he doesn't care. I mean, he fundamentally just doesn't care, right? The progressive members of Congress who could be this kind of anti-Manchin, sort of antithesis of Manchin, and I want to be clear, they're good people who are thinking morally in a sense of harm reduction. If I take down this bill, there won't be unemployment benefits. If I take down this bill, it will kill all the other...
You see what I said about the harm reduction thing? This is something that we've actually had on the show before where I've banned people because of this point. If you think like harm reduction, you are a cuck. And you will forever be played. You have to be willing to say, this is not good enough. If you're someone who just goes, well, it makes the world slightly better, so I guess I have to vote for it.
I've never held more rage at Democrats than I hold
Neo
today.
Silla, thank you for the tier 2. Welcome back.
Yeah, chatting, Mike.
If you really, 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 really come down to it, you're the easiest dupe in the planet. Because they can always offer you the most pathetic crumb, and a crumb is better than an empty plate. So I guess I have to go along with it. See, the problem with that logic is you don't have to go on with it. Because they want the whole fucking cake. It's not you saying no to crumbs. It's you saying to them, no to your cake. If I don't get a slice, you don't get the whole fucking thing. And the centrists want the cake. They want the tens of billions of hundreds of billions of dollars for small businesses. They want the hundreds of billions of dollars for state and local government. They want the money for the vaccines. They want the cake. They need the cake. So if you say, give me a slice or I'm knocking the cake onto the ground, then they have to negotiate with you or they don't get it. If you'll take crumbs while they feast, you'll never get anything but a crumb. And you are a pathetic loser. You have to be willing to ruin the whole situation. And only when they see that resolve will they negotiate with you. Only when they realize we have to give the progressives something or they won't go along with us, then you'll get something. Power concedes nothing without demand, and demand requires action. Demand requires a willingness to lose, to get nothing. When you go on strike, you're hurting your company. That's the company that pays your salary. That's the company that puts food on your table, right? That's what they would say. But in reality, the company needs you. The company can't make money. You are being exploited. You are not being paid a fair wage. You are not getting the value of what you produce. They need you. And so you go on strike and you hurt the company like they're hurting you. And the company is forced to weigh this fact. Either we give in or our company fails. And only in the situation where the company failing is a real risk will they give in. If they can get rid of you and they don't need you, the strike will fail. Only when there is a real threat to the company and to their profits and to their bottom line will they give up. And it's the same thing with legislation. If they don't need you, they will give you nothing. They will tell you, vote no. We don't need you. That is the problem here, is that not enough leftists think like I think. Too many of them think like Vaush. Too many of them think like these little Twitch leftists who've been thinking about politics for approximately 10 minutes. Where, oh, you're hurting all the poor people. You're hurting all the people on unemployment. Oh, you've got to do harm reduction. They're fucking, either they're dupes or they're cowards. And yes, I know people need unemployment. I know people need the direct payments. But I also know that this is it for making demands. And if I'm not willing to say, this is not good enough, you're not getting my help, then I never will get what those people really need. If Joe Manchin is willing to say fuck you to those people, and you told me to vote for that guy. Why is that okay? Why is they can say fuck you to the poor, they can say fuck you to the needy, for the purpose of what? Centrist donors? But progressives are not allowed to say this far, no farther? This is moral bankruptcy. And it's strategic stupidity. Either the Progressive Caucus stands up or they are a pushover. And you know what that results in? If people see that the progressives don't make a stand, don't get concessions, then that movement will fail. Why would people dedicate their lives and their blood and their treasure for a movement that can't fight? People like fighters. People want to see struggle. If you cave, then everyone remembers.
Good things in this bill, which are indeed desperately needed. And I understand that fear. That is a legitimate moral fear. It is a harm reduction fear, and it is the fear that the proponents of getting rid of the minimum wage, like, frankly, or the people who don't care about including the minimum wage, like the Biden administration, that they prey on. If you take a stand, you'll take down the whole bill. If you take that stand, you would. Meanwhile, I mean, what's ridiculous about it is, we're up against the unemployment deadline, which is a real deadline, super real. Like, the people who are citing that deadline are the people who wasted 2 months sitting around doing nothing on this.
By the way, people are saying, why the fuck did we vote for Biden? I had a very specific way I wanted to vote for Biden, but so many people on the left, like Vaush, spent their time punching left, calling people LARPers, calling them ineffective, and basically destroying our ability to extract concessions. Because they went around saying, all the lefties saying fight Biden and get concessions, they're going to make us lose to Trump. Remember that? Do you remember how they spent all their time punching left, going, we got to mock all the lefties who want to demand anything? Remember that? I know how to do harm reduction. I know how to make a strategic choice. At the end of the day, I knew I was going to say you have to vote for Biden in a swing state. But first, I wanted real concessions. And the reality is we didn't get them. We didn't get them. Well, Biden is in office now. So the question is, are we going to exercise our power on Biden, who we theoretically have power over, or are we not? If you're not going to exercise it, then resign, leave. Let somebody replace you who will. And if you were to blame progressives for this problem instead of Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, you're brain dead.
I sat around doing like hacking away at this bill, taking the 2,000 to 1,400. I've been sitting around like all of a sudden it's like we can't even delay this bill 6 hours to add the minimum wage. It's like it's such a bunch of crap, right? And my point, and the deeper point is that those House members, if they actually did this, have to understand that if Biden is staking his presidency on this bill, if this truly is a must-pass bill, which I totally believe it is, there's no killing this bill. There's like, you vote it down, they have to come back and revise it. And I want to give you an example from history where that happened. An even more acute emergency situation. No one remembers this. This is how old I am. This is why I have white, gray going on white hair, right?
It looks good.
Thank you. 2008, George Bush comes to the Congress with the Federal Reserve Chairman and the Treasury Secretary. The entire global economy is going to melt down right now unless we pass. There's literally a 3-page bill that says the Treasury Secretary can literally do whatever he wants forever. The Congress actually was like, okay, we're really scared. This is like really seems real bad, but like we're voting that down. Like, no, I can't pass literally a 3-page bill saying that you're now the king of the world. Like, it's not possible. And they had to immediately, and then, the Dow lost 3,000 points and, everyone freaked out for like 24, 48 hours. And they had to come back with a new bill that was a 65-page. Frankly, it wasn't very much better. I'm be clear about that. Like, it was still a bank bailout. It wasn't very much better. But the point is the idea that like you cast the vote, the bill's gone, it's dead, everything. No, like you vote down a must pass bill, they're going to come back right away. They just have to deal with you. You get to be at the negotiating table and not just on the menu.
And this is in the middle of a week-long stock market crash as Wall Street Bank after Wall Street Bank was faltering.
Yes.
And it seemed like...
That's what we need again. We need the line to go down. Because people like Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, unless capital is feeling the heat, are not going to give any concessions. I want to see what the stock market does when they vote this bill down. I want to see if we can make that line go down. And only when the line is going down will the centrists start to perk up and feel a little bit of urgency, because they don't care about you. They don't care about the working class and the middle class. That's why they're trying to cut your direct payment. That's why they're trying to cut the minimum wage. That's why they're trying to cut your unemployment insurance top off. Because they don't care about you. They do care about the line. The moment the line starts going down is when the panic calls from the donors will go to DC saying, do what you need to do to pass this bill. I don't give a shit about a $50 minimum wage. I just lost $50 million. When that happens, then you're going to get some change. But right now, the stock market's flying high. The rich are making money. The rich love it. The stock market's up near its all-time high. They're loving it. Year to date, it's up 3% in 2 months. 1 year, they're up 20% on their money. If you're a billionaire, in the last year, you made $200 million from the stock market. If you have $1 billion in stocks, just as an index, you made $200 million in 1 year. So yeah, if the line goes up, they're not giving shit. You have to be willing to tank this whole fucking thing.
As global capitalism was, potentially done, and they still...
Oh, here, someone asked me to click max. In 5 years, the stock market is up 85.2%. What's inflation been in 5 years? The rich are getting a higher share of the economy's wealth every year. Who do we hate more, GOP libs or snaky boy libertarians? I mean, libertarians are not even really a fucking thing. And the truth is, when you look at this situation, I do blame AOC. I do blame Bernie. Bernie should say, I'm voting against this bill. No minimum wage, no Bernie vote. And they'll have a $12.50 minimum wage in it the next day. The parliamentarian will get yeeted faster than you can talk. That's the truth. We do politics here every morning starting at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. You can watch us here on Twitch. We're the morning guy, the morning politics guy, Politics Frogs, in every single day, same time, 10 a.m., day in, day out. And we carry you through your morning and early afternoon politics needs. And if you need more, Mike from PA, we have a YouTube channel. We talked about suburbs, the My Pillow guy, Ted Cruz. We talked about DSA. Amazing. Making fun of Tim Pool. Amazing. Look at all of these amazing videos. Get in there, watch them. We have me on Twitter. You got to follow me on Twitter, chat. I'm at 20,614 subs. That means I got like 40 followers on Twitter in the last day. You can do better than that. You can do better than that. Go follow us on Twitter. And of course, join the Discord, where we have an incredible community of left-wing streamers. We have left-wing community. We talk about the stream. We talk about politics. There's gaming content. It's a really awesome, supportive place. Direct action, mutual aid, and you can just let off some steam. And also, you can help produce the show. One of the things I do is I look at the links that are put into the news content suggestions chat room on the Discord. Join the Discord, come hang out, and maybe what you want me to talk about will be part of the next show.